What up?
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. No complaints. Well,
Yeah.
plenty of complaints, but it's not about me per se. You get what
Right,
I'm saying?
right.
Uh, so prompt. I appreciate that.
You should have seen the hurricane that happened through my house in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, I can believe it. I was like, oh wait, I forgot. And and we're live. So I appreciate you coming on board and joining me for this endeavor. This is my second month, my first interview this second month. May was a great experience, and June is already shaping up to be very, very dope as well. So it's rare that I get my sisters on here with me. I'm trying to change that. You know, you all are in such demand, so I
Ah,
have to wait my turn.
oh
Um,
gosh.
but needless to say, we're on. What up, Lil John?
Hey,
Uh,
Lil John.
one of our compadres in common. Um, I wanted to start off by talking about New York. Now, tell me about, people are transplants, they move all over the place. Is New York actually your origin? I read that was
Yeah,
true. Is
New
okay,
York is my birthplace,
okay,
but I was raised more so in DC. DC,
nice.
DC, DMV, PG County,
Okay,
So that's my stomping ground. I'm really a DC girl, DMV girl at heart.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of growing up in DC, like there are a lot of different perspectives when it comes to DC in terms of where you may grow up or kind of what your stomping grounds actually were kind of when you were first like starting. I would love to kind of hear a little bit about that.
Um, yeah, I was one of okay, let me say this. Like my family aren't Washingtonians,
Okay.
So my roots in DC aren't as deep as like so many people that I know. You know
Okay.
what I mean? My dad is from Queens, my mother is from Tennessee. And so I would spend a lot of time going back and forth between, in the summers, half of my summer would be spent in New York and half would be in Tennessee. Um, so my roots in DC really didn't start being planted musically until probably later in what contemporary music, probably until high school.
Okay.
Prior to that, like my elementary school and middle school years, I was doing, classical piano, and then I got into like the choir circuit, which was
Understood.
like, you know, an amazing thing for me because the first time I had ever tried out for a choir, I didn't make it in.
Okay. Okay.
And I didn't make it in because I was super shy and I didn't understand what the choir director was asking me to do. This is like third grade. This is at Naylor Road Private School in Southeast. And I was really mad about it because everybody else got into the choir except me. I was mad.
Wow.
But I didn't understand what she was asking me to do. She's like sing the solfege scale. I'm 7 years old. I was like, what is that? You know,
Mhm.
I was like, soulful scale, and she's like, do re mi fa sol la ti do, and from The Sound of Music, and I didn't know what she was talking about. I come from a very, very black household, and I didn't know what The Sound of Music was. I had never seen that movie. I didn't know what she was talking about. So she had asked me to sing like "Ease on Down the Road." It would have
Okay.
been, it would have been a go. But so but later, a couple of years later, in a new school, the new music teacher was like, you should try out for this thing called county chorus, and this is Prince George's County, and it sounded like something I would be interested in. It was exclusive. She was like, they only pick 2 or 3 kids from every school, and I was like, ooh, now that sounds like something I want to do.
Yeah.
And I tried out and I got in, but it exposed me to a whole new world, outside of, like my church home and what I knew from the playground. It was a whole new world of kids singing choral music. And I did that all the way through high school. I did county, elementary, I did middle school county, then I went to all state, then I did all Eastern, and then I went to U.S. National Chorus and went to Europe for the first time, I think when I was 16, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
that
cool.
was like, yeah, that was sort of my schooling vocally. Now, when I graduated from high school, my mother finally let me join a go-go band, which was what I really wanted to do.
Okay.
Um, but you know, she wasn't gonna let me do that until I finished high school.
Well,
When I,
let me ask you about
uh-huh.
the musical influence from your parents,
Mm,
because my mom is from Cincinnati, my dad is from Savannah,
okay,
and I grew up in Louisiana, you know,
okay,
initially. So my influence comes from two kind of different worlds. There were certain areas where the music would cross, but I
yeah,
would be interested to hear, because Tennessee, right,
right,
and Queens, you
Queen,
know, what is that like musically growing up? You said y'all, you know, you listen, you know, I mean, I'm assuming that you listen to a whole lot of black music as well, if
yeah,
you know it was a part of the kind of cultural fabric of your
absolutely.
life. So I would be interested to hear, like, how did that work? Who is from what? You
My
said your dad is from New York, right?
Yeah, my
Okay,
dad's from New York and my mom
interesting.
is from Tennessee. And so my mother is not a musician at all. She
Okay,
can't even clap on the two and the four without help. It's a problem. But I love her to death. Hey, Serena. Um, but my mother was always very much in tune with progressive art, and she always played stuff for me that I don't think every kid's parents played for them. Like my mom would play The Last Poets on Saturday mornings to clean the house, you know.
nice,
And so Niggas Are Scared of Revolution was the kind of stuff I listened to at, you know, at 6 and 7 and 8 years old, you know.
nice.
Um, and she would play Nina Simone and Aretha Franklin and all that kind of stuff too, you know. Um, but but she was very much about schooling me on not just stuff that I would hear on the radio or that she would hear on the radio, but like giving me literature, you know,
Yeah,
um, and books. She gave me lots of books, and I mentioned this because all of this kind of plays a part in how I became a songwriter. But definitely, she would have me listen to Sonia Sanchez and listen to Nikki Giovanni albums and things like that. You know. Now my father was very much and still is very much a Queens boy, Queens kid. Grew up,
still
you
there.
know, he's actually in Maryland now, but he spent, you know, his younger years. He was stand on the street corner singing with his friends, you know, doo wop,
Nice.
and he used to play all that stuff for me, you know, and play all those doo wop records and Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers and you know, my dad had a jukebox with old records, and you know, he would he would sometimes take me, you know, he would like pick me up sometimes in the morning when I was supposed to go to school and steal me away, and we'd go to New York for the day and take me to, or for the weekend, and we would go to like old school concerts at Westbury Music Fair, you know, that kind of thing, and I'd see the Five Satins
Wow.
and the Blue this and Blue Magic and whoever, you know, whoever was singing that night, and we'd go to the Bleecker Street Records, you know, and he, you know, and I'd watch him buy those really old collector's albums. Like that was his thing. So he was very much, and so all of that sort of doo-wop harmony, you know, that's really kind of where I learned how to harmonize, you know, was just singing with my dad, you know. And he could,
What
my,
was, so I'm, go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh no, I was gonna say my dad, you know, he sings and he just didn't pursue it professionally, but he's a really good singer. And I put him on my last album just so people could hear, you know.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
dope. That's dope. So what was the early concept of the of worldview coming from your parents? Was it different, or was there a unified message that they tried to give you growing up, or was one like more southern and one was more like, you know,
Oh,
northern?
that's a really good question, Cameron. I think my father was sort of apolitical
Okay.
when it came to certain things, but but he also spoke German, and and always encouraged me to see the, you know what my dad did? He always encouraged me to take up space whenever I felt like it, and to own the space that I was in. You know, so I learned that kind of thing from my dad, like entering a room and taking up as much as I wanted to in that room, you know.
Yes.
My mother was very much, you know, she had all of the leftover remnants of the 60s, you know, Black Panther flags and Free Huey and buttons and and she schooled me on all of that. You know, she schooled me on the movement, what it was about. You know, they both went to all Black schools. You know, I think, yeah. Well, I don't know about my father in New York, if his public school was segregated. It probably wasn't, but my mother's definitely were. And then both of them went to Black colleges. You know.
Okay.
So that was a big part of my life too. You know, I wouldn't have chosen any other college but Howard University. You
Nice.
know, and yeah, so it's different. And my mom always said, you know, your dad is apolitical, but I was like, I think his politics were more personal and
Okay.
more about individual individual liberation, if you will, you know,
Yeah.
and what that means, you know, for the collective, if we all are individually, you know, making sure that we own whatever space we want to be in, you know.
Yes. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So I was gonna stop you because I was like, no, don't go to Howard yet, because I
I'm
really want to
sorry.
talk about Howard. But now let's talk about Howard. So two kind of more larger questions, and I'm sure there's smaller intricacies within both of them. I went to Morehouse,
Hey,
and you know, so it's like when it comes to music at a Black school, there's so many layers and elements of where you can get your exposure from. You know, like there are
yeah,
some that are in the band and, you know,
right,
music majors or in the glee club, and then there are others that are kind of using the college circuit, if you will, to get that exposure and
right.
practice with their peers. And then there are others who are venturing out into the city, you know, to do their thing. I was wondering um, how you managed to fall in with that culture at Howard musically, or or did you allow yourself even to get into that? Because being already in DC, you already, I would assume, and I guess this would tie into your time leading the go-go band. Where did that cross in
Right.
with Howard? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So at Howard, like I was saying earlier about I was doing the choir thing all through high school. Well, my last director of the Prince George's High School Honors Choir was James Weldon Norris, who was also at Howard University. So he encouraged me to go ahead and be in the university chorale when I got to Howard.
Okay.
So, but my major wasn't music at Howard. I didn't audition for the fine arts program. I didn't even try because I was a science and tech kid in high school, and I just didn't think I would even be able to compete and get in to a competitive program as competitive as Howard's arts program is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I was part of the university chorale, but other than that, my first year at Howard, most people didn't even really know I was a musician, except people who might have come to my dorm room and seen my keyboard,
Gotcha.
right? Now, when I was, but I was still in the band. The band was called Royalty.
Okay.
Royalty Queens. Well, shout out to Royalty. Now the girls in the band, they weren't at Howard. You know, a couple of them I think went to UDC, and I was just playing keys and singing backup in that band. I wasn't the leader. Like,
Okay.
yeah, this girl Misha was the lead singer. My girl Cleo played keys and sang. Erica played bass. Later on, Cherie, this girl Sweet Cherie, she joined it and was playing keys. And Shawnee Baby was on drums. Um, but yeah, that was like a whole separate life from Howard. You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't until late, maybe my sophomore or junior year, because I think I only did chorale 1 year. It wasn't until maybe my sophomore or junior year when I auditioned for a group at Howard called In Time.
Okay.
And In Time was Gino Young.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right.
Homie.
Daryl Hunt on keys, Angela May, Shanice, I forgot her last name, forgive me. This guy Lauren Samuel and Alvin Thomas. Now, and we were kind of like an acapella, you know, kind of like Boyz II Men meets Manhattan Transfer,
Okay.
meets New York Voices, you know, like we were doing a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, it wasn't until I got into In Time that people on campus even really knew I was like a singer, you know.
Wow. Okay.
And then there was a guy. See, everything was so kind of separated, because then there was my friend Scotty Beats, who was an engineer at a studio called Night Flight, and Scotty would have me come out to Night Flight and demo songs and do that kind of thing, sing hooks for people. But that was more like hip hop R&B stuff, and so the hip hop cats kind of knew I could sing, but they were completely separate from the fine arts cats,
right.
You know?
Yeah.
So it was really strange how all of that worked. And I was still kind of holding down my gig with royalty, you know, whenever we were gigging, you know, wherever those shows might have been, you know.
So within Time, was that basically off campus, or did you do any college-based shows?
We did a couple of things on campus, but usually we were performing at other things off campus, or even sometimes in different cities, you know, like this was when B. Smith's restaurant was popping in New York. And so we would perform there. I think one time we might have done something at Patti LaBelle's restaurant in Philly. I remember us doing a gig at the Delta Convention in St. Louis, you know, that kind of stuff.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were just trying to play any place that would pay us.
Yeah, I hear you. Was it like the typical thing? Where was the weekend getaway, I guess, for Howard students? Was it New York, or would you go to Philly or all over?
You know, I can't really say, because everybody kind of had their own thing, you know.
Okay.
My weekend getaway was usually, I mean, if I decided to go anywhere, it might have been home every 6 weeks to do laundry, you know.
Yes.
But everybody had different things that they, you know. Howard's one of those places where you could find your tribe. There were so many different, you know, groups, you know, places to belong.
So for those that don't know about go-go music, or the more intricacies of go-go music, because I've been around people who either are from DC or have lived in DC a long time or what have you, and they're quick to tell you when something is like not, you like inauthentic go-go music, or
Right.
Nah, that's kind of fake, or nah, like, you know. Is there what is the element that really is the core element of go-go music, really?
I mean, it's that backbeat, you know, but honestly, like all kinds of music, even the backbeat of go-go has kind of evolved, you know, and even the tempos evolve, you know, like when you're talking about early go-go, like late 70s, early 80s, just post-disco, that go-go was hella fast, you know, and I'm like hella, like I'm from the Bay.
It's all good.
But you know, but that pocket was really fast, and that backbeat was really fast. If you play any of those old Trouble Funk records, and Drop the Bomb, stuff like that, and then as you moved into the 80s, when you're really coming out of the cabaret go-go and more into the club go-go, that's when it kind of slowed down a little bit, you know, and that 80s, that Chuck Brown, you know, go-go swing stuff, that's when you had the you know, you had that, and everything was kind of based on that. But you got to get into some of the new stuff. You know, what the kids are doing out there now is slightly different, and it's dope. And I can't even begin to imitate it on the chair right now. But you know,
it's all good.
You know, Backyard and some of those bands, what they're doing now is even slightly different. You know, and I dig it. You know, it's dope.
Wow.
You know. It's all so black and so African. I think that's what really amazes me is how through generations of, you know, of torture and being pulled and uprooted from a place that we came from, and then told you can't practice this and you can't do that, you can't even speak your language, you can't play your music, and somehow through our DNA a piece of it is still there, and that's amazing to me. That's why go-go means so much to me, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's dope. So was there a turning point at Howard while you were matriculating that
Come on, matriculating.
Was there a turning point where you were like, you know what, I'm gonna try to go ahead and pursue this head on? I'm curious to know. I read that you went from Howard, let's say, or DC, let's say, to LA.
Yeah.
Is that true? And
yeah.
why not New York? Why LA? That's
a good question. These are all good questions. So yes, there was a point where I said in my matriculation, because I went for psychology. Okay. So in psychology, you know, by your junior year, you're starting to prepare for your GREs so that you can get into grad school. And I was doing really well in psychology. I love that discipline. I love my professors. And I studied and took my GREs, and I did really well on them. And so other grad schools had started to court me for their programs, right? And I went out and visited some programs, and I realized, you know, this is going to be another 5 or 6 years of school. I don't know if I can make that commitment, you know, after I finish right away. And so it was my junior year that I decided I wasn't going to apply to any grad school programs. And I told my mom and dad, and, you know, actually they took it totally different than I thought they would. My mother was way more understanding. My father was like, but you know, my mother totally got it. She was like, do what you need to do, you know, and you'll figure your life out. And my father was like, you know, I paid all that money, you better figure it out quick. Yeah. and I moved. I stayed in DC for a little while and worked on Capitol Hill, and then I got a part in a play that brought me to LA. And I came out here to do that play, and the play was like, whatever, you know, but it got me here. And I was like, I think I want to stay. So I went back to DC and packed up my stuff and drove back out here, and was talking to my good friend who also went to Howard with me, named Gordon Campbell. And Gordon's a drummer. And Gordon was the one who kind of helped me get into the game here in LA. But it was that, what was your question? Why didn't I go to New York? Yeah. There were two reasons. One, the play brought me to LA. And two, New York was so close to home. I didn't want to be that accessible to my parents. That was the original reason. And now, of course, I'm like, oh, I'm so far away. I miss my mama. I miss my daddy. But that was what it was. I didn't want to be that close to home, because I felt like they were going to come, and you know, one of them would find a reason to come visit me every week. You know. Wow. Oh, that's what I thought. You know, that's the self-centeredness of a young person, thinking, you know, that all your parents think about you. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Shout out to Sheila E. She was in here saying hey.
Hey, Sheila E. I talked to her earlier today. We're working on something I'm excited about.
Nice. For everybody just tuning in, I'm Kameron Corvet. I am Candid with Cy Smith, and I am diving in as much as I possibly can.
Hi,
well, let me ask you this. It seems like acting has been just as much a part of your background as music has. You know, has that always been kind of like a dual thing, or?
It hasn't always been so defined as a dual thing. You know what it was for me? Before I really kind of came out of my shell as a singer, before I came out of my shell as a singer, I was really sort of a class, I don't want to say a class clown, but but I had no problem like it was always my job to entertain whatever group I was in. And I don't mean entertain by singing, but like I was always the person that would tell jokes, or I was always the person that could imitate everybody, you know. And so in the family, for instance, if there was like a family gathering, a family reunion or something, there was always like, Side, do Robin. Side, do Aunt Patty. Side, do Aunt, you know, do cousin so-and-so, you know. And I could do everybody.
Wow.
So the acting part was more of my just being able to be on stage and sort of be a character, you know.
Gotcha.
And getting that part of the play that brought me here to LA helped me explore that more, you know. But it wasn't something that I did in, you know, high school that much. You know, I think I did like one production in high school, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's always something I've known I could do.
Okay.
Know? Yeah.
It's a long way from, you know, it's a long way from being timid on the first choir audition. You know what I mean?
It totally is. If my choir audition had asked me to tell a joke, I would have been a shoo-in.
Did you have an imitation of her after a while, or any of your choir?
I didn't. You know, I think I blocked her out of my mind. I don't even remember that woman's name.
Oh my goodness. Can I ask you a question from a psychological standpoint?
Yes.
It's about music therapy.
Yeah. So
what is music therapy? Break it down, like the feng shui of music therapy.
Well, the clinical definition is, or the formal definition is using music in a therapeutic setting to bring about desirable behavioral changes. Okay? So it's not like putting on a song and somebody feels better. That's not what music therapy is. It's designing a program that includes music as part of the program to, you know, instill activities to help bring about very specific behavioral changes. So this was my minor in college, and Howard was one of only 2 schools in DC that had accredited music therapy programs at the time. I think it was just Howard and Trinity College. So for instance, as part of my music therapy practicum at Howard, I worked with geriatric populations, and sometimes those geriatric populations, these are elderly people, right? So sometimes those populations had dual diagnoses, like usually it was something like bipolar disorder and dementia, you know, or schizophrenia and dementia. So we would, for instance, I would go maybe twice a week to a center, and we would do an activity, like I'd gather everyone in a circle, maybe pass out a couple of little hand drums or tambourines or something like that, and just play a rhythm, ga, ga, ba, ga, ba. And then we go around the circle and say our names. My name is da, da. Today is Tuesday, you know, things like that. Because the goal was to get them to be present in that day, you know, so that they wouldn't be sundowning. You know, sundowning is when people who are suffering from dementia start forgetting things or not being present towards the end of a day, you know. So getting them to stay present early on and throughout the day. So that's how we did that, you know.
Nice.
And it would start out with like simple things that seem simple to us, like saying your name and the day of the week and the time, what time it is or something. And then we go into things like how we feel that day, you know. Yeah. And the rhythm would help them stay engaged, you know, and you know, and it would also encourage them to think on their feet, stay present, because they knew they were next, and the rhythm went like this, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Wow. I just think it's so, you know, music therapy with the people like our people, you know, and so many minorities. There's a deep connection with music and culture, and you know, I feel like there's a lot that can be done with that, especially when it comes to like healing, you know what I mean?
Right.
Healing and being willing to open up about certain things. We have a tendency as a people to kind of close everything off or certain things, you know, and a lot of times that first step, you know, like being willing to audition for something is like
Right.
it's really the breakthrough before the breakthrough, you know, just
Right.
being willing to try. So I think I always thought that was great. When I read that, I was like, wow, this is,
Oh,
I could see that being something really heavily added into the curriculum, especially in schools that have a minority population that is really the majority, if you will. You know,
right.
it
Right.
just, I was a French teacher. So when I was a
Ah.
French teacher, I would teach my kids certain, you know, simple phrases. You know,
Yeah.
everybody broke French into this. Oh my gosh, I can't speak a paragraph, but
Yeah.
I used to try to break it down into a rhythmic type of thing as well. You know, song stuff. So it'd be like,
That's so
Est-ce que
funny.
je peux tailler mes crayons? Est-ce que je peux aller aux toilettes? That
Yeah.
type of thing, and they retained it more, and
Right.
they liked participating more. You know, so
Look,
I just love that.
my second grade teacher, I had French in second and third grade, and my second grade teacher used to teach us the names of animals in French with a song. And I still remember it to this day. I'm always messing with my husband, and I'll sing it to him because she would always go, Les animaux, les animaux, les animaux, les animaux, le lapin, le lapin, le chat, le chat, la tigre, la tigre, le hippopotame, la hippopotame.
Still remember that. Think
I
about
still
that.
remember it. I still remember it.
There's a
Yep,
lot to be said about that. So shout out to you
absolutely.
for that. Has that ever helped you woosah in a moment of stress or
Absolutely. It's definitely helped me woosah. But sometimes I have to remember that I have that tool, you
yeah.
know? And I think that is one of the things that music therapy also can help people do is remember that we have other tools. But music therapy is one of the things. But you know, meditation, there are a lot of different tools that we have that we just forget, you know, and it's, you know, it's just one of those things you forget it if you don't practice it, you know, or if you were
Yeah.
never introduced to it in the first place, you know.
True.
um
Wow.
so did I lose you? Okay, there we are.
No.
So okay, so yeah, it's just one of those tools that I have, and every now and then I'll remember to pull it out of my back pocket and do exactly that,
Wow.
you know.
So
Yeah.
how did playing piano and keys get introduced to you then, and what was that introduction?
That introduction happened. My grandparents had an old piano at their home in Tennessee. I remember that lower D used to stick, and 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 my grandfather was like my best friend, and he couldn't really play the piano, but he could play that boogie woogie bass line on the black
Okay.
notes, and so he would play that, and he would teach me that, and whenever I would play it, he would start doing this little silly dance, and so then I was like, I want to learn how to play stuff and make my granddad dance. You know, I want to do, and I didn't really know. And I'm talking about I'm young, like 5, 4, 5, 6. I told my mom that I wanted piano lessons, and when I went back to DC, she got me these weird piano lessons that were like weird public school. It was ratchet. Like it was 12 of us in a class, and we all shared like one keyboard, and it was, you know, and it was like in the evenings once a week. And I didn't know how to really say, I didn't know how to articulate private instruction. You know, I
Okay.
was just
Yeah.
like, Mommy, I want it so that it's just me and the teacher, you know. And she was like, Oh, you want a private teacher? And I'm like, Yes, that's what I want. So maybe when I was about 8, she got me a private teacher,
Okay.
um, Mr. Roas, Saul Roas from Buenos Aires.
Yes.
And I studied under him for maybe 4 or 5 years before I switched to another teacher. But that was my beginning, you know, my classical instruction, and that changed my life, you know,
Yeah. Wow.
because you know, it was like not only a music schooling, you know, thing, but it was also just sort of a discipline thing, you
Yeah.
know, and a self, you know, when you know this, when you learn things and you know, you're by yourself. And I kind of grew up as an only child. It was just me and my mom, you know, for the most part. Uh, so, you know, when you're learning things and you can teach yourself stuff, and you see yourself getting better at things, it's so satisfying, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I got a lot out of it just from that, aside from the music that I learned and, you know, all of that, falling in love with every Bach member of the family that I could fall in love with.
Yeah. So would you say as a songwriter, your prowess as a musician or as a vocalist has like really kind of led the way when it comes to expressing yourself through your own text?
I think as a songwriter, my love affair with words has
Okay.
led the way. Yeah. And that goes back to what I was saying about my mom really introducing me to Nikki Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, and that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. You had all the makings, to be able to pull from and put all the things together, because I don't want to say there are a lot of artists out there with too much opportunity to speak, and they don't really have an understanding of what they're talking about. Let's just say there aren't enough artists that do have the wherewithal to be able to understand the platform that they have. When it's time to speak and really express themselves, they're not necessarily coming from an authentic place. It could just be a momentary type of thing, that's moving them. So I appreciate that. Like I grew up in a similar fashion. My grandmother had a piano right in the dining room. It was like next to where we would, where Thanksgiving dinner would be, is the piano right there. So I understand what that's like, and it just creates a great backdrop for different things to pull from. So I think that's super dope. I always also say that a lot of times these days people want to be the star right away. They don't necessarily spend time in a group or spend time serving or supporting someone else's vision or mission by playing, let's say, in a band or something like that. So I wanted to touch on your experience singing with other singers.
Oh yes.
Your that resume, I was reading that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like singers, you know what I mean? Like Whitney Houston, Brandy, Usher, Eric Benet, these are all people they're not messing around. So I was curious about what you gleaned from those experiences as a singer, and how you found your own voice in the midst of being in those situations.
Yes, because that second part, that latter part, finding my own voice, took a minute for me, because for so many years I didn't really see myself as that girl. I wasn't the girl that sat in front of a mirror with a brush and did all this. Like that wasn't even my motivating force in music. I just loved being a part of bands and parts of I love the mechanics of it. I love the horn lines and the orchestral things going on in music, and I love backgrounds, and my singing stuff with my father, and that kind of doo-wop thing really lent itself to what I ended up doing when I got out here, which was, like you said. So my friend Gordon Campbell had introduced me to Kenny Lattimore, and that was my very first gig. That was my very first professional tour.
Wow.
And you couldn't have a better first gig than Kenny Lattimore, because everyone in the band was super cool. Everybody, yes, that is the Sheila E. in the house. Yes, indeed. Everybody in the band was super cool and super talented. And Kenny himself was just the most gentleman that you could ever meet. And I learned watching people like Kenny, Whitney, Eric Benet, just watching them work a stage, watching how singers pace themselves. These 2-hour shows ain't no joke. So I learned a lot about pacing. I learned a lot about letting the people who are there on stage with you to support you, letting them do what they do. I learned a lot about how to put your band together with musicians that you can trust will do what you need to do. Like singing with Michelle and Cello, for instance. When I started singing with her, I don't even think there was a one singer like everybody else in the band did something. I think there was Kenny Allen sang and played guitar, but there was no like singer, backup singer. You know, she let me carve my space there, and you know, be a part of the thing. You know,
Yeah.
so I learned a lot about bringing people into the space who do what you need them to do, and trusting that they'll do it. You know,
Yeah.
Sheila E is another one. You know, like when I toured with her, it was the same thing. She kind of allowed me to carve my little space, and then bring her exactly what she needed. I hope, girl, I hope I brought you what you needed. But yeah, so I learned, and it's like, I can't even believe that we're naming the names that we're naming. You know, like I would have never believed that I would come out here and do this with these names. That part is amazing in itself, but I'm really blessed to have been able to glean those kinds of lessons, you know, because I know that not every singer is able to do that. You know, there's some singers who are so focused on being heard, you know, that they forget, you know, the workings of all of it, how it all flows together, you know.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about space, you know, from these particular artists, you know, spacing and pacing. Woo! Because let me reiterate, them 2-hour shows ain't no hope.
Does it, as a musician yourself, does it make it, do you get a little like, did you ever go through a micromanaging phase when it came to keys? Because
Absolutely. Like, I used to play a lot more for myself than I do now. And it was a function of, I couldn't really afford a keyboard player back then when I was playing. And now that I can kind of have one, I don't really like to play as much because I just feel like I'm so not good, you know? and, you know, when you're friends with people like James Poyser, you know what I mean? You just feel completely inadequate when you touch a keyboard. When you know Greg Filling Gaines, you don't ever want to touch a keyboard again, you know? You know? But I have started to play more because I need to not forget how to do that, you know? And even with this last album I did, I wrote and produced every song on that album. And I wrote the songs at the piano because I wanted to be able to have a moment in my artistry where I could sit and play a whole album if I wanted to, you know?
very important. Very important.
Important.
I think people start piling things on sometimes, and they forget, like, hey, you're the root, you know, at any point in time, we need to be able to, you know, and sometimes it creates that. I used to have problems because I used to just be like, man, I'm going to get the best, the best, and the best and best. And then I'd be on stage like, damn, can I sing? Yo, I mean, what's, you know, or I would be distracted because they were so good. I'm like singing, and, you know, Daryl Freeman or somebody hits a crazy bass line. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know. But
you feel me? Yeah. And like somebody reminded me in the thread about my live DVD. Like, yeah, I used to have like Kamasi Washington in my band and Thundercat, you know, and like, where do you go from there?
Crazy.
You know? But thank you, Sheila, for saying I can. Thank you guys for the kind words. I'm reading everybody's comments. I'm sorry I can't. I'm trying to speak.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Thank you all for that.
That's what's up. Okay, so your voice. Did you say, okay, did you start with, this is my message? Did you start with, this is my tone that I want to, you know, like, where did it all, how, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm just trying here. We're just going there.
these are some questions. Okay, you know, when I came out here and decided to really start pursuing music, I, I wasn't pursuing music from the concept of me. I was not trying to be a recording artist. Like
Okay.
that wasn't my goal. I wanted to be a songwriter, and I was trying to get a publishing deal. You know, so I was writing with all of these different producers. My boy Sauce from Something for the People, you know, took me under his wing, and I was writing a lot of songs with him. My boy Big Tone, and a lot of other people. So my remember DATs, my DAT tape of all of my of all of my songs, all of them were me singing them because I'm a singer. So the publishing people thought they thought it was like a recording artist demo, you know, and everybody was saying she should get a recording deal. She should, you know, and I'm like, no, that's not what I'm trying to do. I don't want to do that, you know. And it wasn't until like, you know, 4 or 5 different publishing houses were like, you should get her signed, that I finally said, let me just take a record deal. You know, because I think that my songs were so individualized and so kind of quirky at the time, you know, and my voice it was so kind of whimsical that they just really couldn't see anybody else singing these songs, you know.
Gotcha.
And so I started to, and I was like, man, but I want Coco to sing this, you know. You know, I want Brandy to sing this, but I started to embrace that whimsy sort of element that I guess I had, you know, and sort of that conversational tone that would sometimes come out, and it took a while to embrace that, Kameron, because I was mad, you know. I was like, I wanted to sound like and be received the same way all of my favorites were, you know, even though I knew I was never going to sound like Faith Evans, you know, I was never going to sound like, you know what I mean? You feel me?
Yeah, I feel it.
But I started to just embrace it. And maybe, you know, by the time I got to my first album, the record label never put the album out, right? They put out a single. Somebody mentioned in this thread, they mentioned Gladly. Shout out to whoever knew Gladly. I think his name was Marvin. I think your name was Marvin. They put out a single, but even though they didn't put out the album, I got so much out of recording that thing, and I learned so much about myself and learned so much about my artistry, and I learned to love it, you know? And so it took me a minute to kind of regain my footing after getting dropped, but by the time I released my not my EP, because I released an EP first, but by the time I released the Cyberspace Social, I think I was fully engaged and fully, or maybe not fully 100% sure of myself, but I was fully engaged in what I was doing, you know, and I was fully, I believed in it, you know. I was like, okay, I actually have a point of view. I actually have a voice. You know, I have something to say. You know what Outkast say at the Source Awards?
Yeah.
South has something to say. You know, I was like, Sy Smith has something to say. You know,
That's what's up. I love it. I love it. I was listening to that album earlier. That's the one that's got the Anthony Hamilton
yes,
collab on it. I love that joint. That joint.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was one of my early times producing something myself. You know.
Really?
Yeah. So I think I had I still got my little roads here. So I wrote them little chords, but I pulled in like Tim Carmen is playing on that, and Joseph Lineberg is playing trumpet, and it's like some cats. But it was one of my first times, you know, like delegating and producing. And so
I can imagine. Do you feel like when you're in producer mode and recording mode, you're more moved by, you know, live instrumentation, or is there a way for, you know, the digital elements to kind of give you the same feeling?
I think I embrace a bit of both. The The only thing with me is I don't really do drum programming. I don't really do programming. Like a lot of times, well, the stuff that I'm producing, if I'm playing it, I'm probably playing it down live or, playing like 16 bars at a time and sectioning it off like that. Um, but but I think I'm getting good at figuring out who goes where and who can bring me what I need. So like for instance, for the last project, I got my man Ty Macklin out of Dallas Fort Worth to do a lot of the drum programming, and then I would pull in some of my live players to add drum stuff on top of that. Because I think live stuff is really what I love anyway. I think programming stuff makes things accessible for people, but live stuff is really where folks do that.
Yeah.
You
There's
know.
no substitution for, the pocket that a drummer just has on its own, on
Yeah.
his or her own, just where it even can slide and shift, but
Right.
there's something about the pieces that are composing that rhythm section that always stay in
Yep.
a certain type of pocket. So
Yep.
I definitely feel you on that
Yeah.
one. I want to ask, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, Sheila E. is playing on the song called "Catastrophe" on this last project, and it's that human touch, that it's a human touch, and every time somebody hears it, they go, "Is that Sheila E.?" Because they can hear her right away, there's that too. There's the actual, the skin contact, there's that element.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I mean, someone like Sheila E. is bringing all of her experiences, all of her knowledge, all of her emotion into that.
That right,
You can't. I mean, when you have a collective of people that get what it is you do and also understand how to make their instrument work within the context of other instruments, you really never go wrong. You
right,
still have to choose the right people though, which is what I don't think a lot of people understand about producing. You don't necessarily have to play every instrument.
right. Yeah,
Sometimes the production is
knowing who.
you know,
That's what Quincy Jones is a master.
master. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a big part of what producing is. Yeah, for sure.
Sweet. Okay, what I was going to ask you is,
Okay.
before we run out of time, I want to
Okay.
make sure we could do a part 2. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I have other questions to ask specifically about being a woman in the industry,
Okay.
messages
Get
and
into
everything
it.
like that. And I know people want to hear because it's been great so far. So before Instagram cuts us off, I just wanted to make sure that was cool with you. Everybody who's tuning in, it's been great. There's been a lot of love.
Thank you,
So
everybody. Thank you,
yes.
everybody.
Yes, so come right back. I'm gonna upload this so people
Okay.
can check it out, and then I'll be right back on,
Okay.
and we can keep going. All right.
All right. Cool.
Cool. See you in a second.
In a minute.
All right. So, as I mentioned earlier, I don't get the opportunity to speak to a lot of women.
Okay.
At least thus far. I'm hoping that changes, and you're the spark that makes things better in that way. But I wanted to ask you more specific questions about your experience in that way as it relates to being a woman in the music industry. Starting, especially going the indie route, starting your own situation, having your own, business entity and doing your music in that way. It has not been the traditional route.
Right.
So like I remember listening to Psycho Soul.
Yeah.
I love that project.
Thank you. Thank you.
Love that project. And I just was thinking about, wow, putting a project together is not an easy feat.
No.
And especially when people have notions about who you are, what type of business you do, and how they can, let's say, handle you. That's an industry term. So especially being in LA, LA is
Right.
no joke either when it comes to all you can experience. So I was curious what led you to wanting to establish your own entity, and how was it at first when you were first trying to put those first projects together?
Well, what led me to it was just getting dropped from the label and them not putting out that album. Actually, Psycho Soul was the album I made with Hollywood Records that they didn't release.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
And so it was one of those things where, you know, for maybe about a year, I kind of rolled around, not aimlessly, I was still working. But I was like singing backup for different people and doing lots of commercials and that kind of stuff. Um, but, you know, one day I was like, I had all these songs that I had written, some with Sauce and some where I was sort of producing myself. And I was like, let me just put together a 5-song EP and print it up, you know. And I drove over to disc makers in Burbank and, you know, was like, how much does it cost to get some CDs made, you know? And it was really, I wasn't even thinking, you know, there was no strategy. It was just me saying, let me just put something together. Oh, because I was doing shows. I was doing a lot of shows here in town. And people would ask for a CD at the end of the night, and I didn't have anything. So, you know, I put together this EP, and the EP sold. You know, I was selling it. You know, and I was like, well, damn. You know, there's space for me somewhere here. You know, so then maybe 2003, 2004, I was like, let me see if I can put together an entire project. And that was the Cyberspace Social, right?
Okay.
And again, you know, there was space for it. That it got reviews, it got, you know, press. You know, that I definitely didn't have a machine doing that. You know, but there was space, and I always knew there was a place for someone like me, even though everybody else seemed to not know this, you know? And so like venues, like here in LA, I couldn't get booked anywhere, you know? So this is like around 2000, you know, I couldn't really get booked anywhere. So there was a coffee shop called Lucy Florence Coffee Shop, and Macy Gray had been doing a thing called the wee hours from 1 to 5 in the morning on Saturday nights. And she was getting ready to blow up. So she was like, I need you to do the wee hours. I need you to keep it going. You know, just keep it going. Just, you'll be dope. You'll be great. You'll be fantastic. And so I was like, all right. So I started doing the wee hours at Lucy Florence. And then they moved into a bigger space, and they allowed me to keep doing wee hours. Oh, and then I started another thing there called Bitchcraft. And Bitchcraft was a venue. It was a program that I sort of brought in other women, you know, not just singers. I brought in women comedians, women actresses, choreographers, to just do whatever they do, you know. And then I had a DJ Spark, would spin between acts, and then at the end of the night I would play like a 45-minute set, and it was dope, you know. And people were really coming out to Bitchcraft. And by this time, Lucy Florence had moved into like a 100-seat theater, you know. And again, even though, you know, I was doing this stuff, still people were trying to tell me, well, well, that's LA, or well, that's Leimert Park, or well, you know. And it sort of took a network of independent artists like myself, but a network of us kind of scattered around, you know. So you had like Wes Felton and Raheem Devon, who was still, they were still Urban Avenue 31 at the time, you know, in DC, and you know, Gino Young in Dallas, and in Dombey, you know, and you know, so some of us would just kind of network with each other, and then I would be able to go to do a show in Dallas, and then I'd be able to do a show in DC, you know, and that
Nice.
kind of thing, you know. All the while, you know, you still had some of these venues thinking there was not a place for us. We would have to I would have to keep proving myself, you know, over and over, you know. So that's what it's kind of like being a woman and sort of being an independent artist at the time. Another thing about being a girl is, like, when I go to a studio, I always have to kind of prove myself with the engineer, like that I know what I'm talking about, you know. And so for that reason, I just kind of stayed with, you know, the same engineer, you know, for years, you know, just so I don't have to waste time building a rapport. you know,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
I totally get it though. I totally can see it. Like you're like, hey, I think I would like to. You're like, you sure you don't want to? You sure you don't? Like,
That.
bro, I know what I want to do.
I know what I want to do. Oh my God.
Have
It's
things changed?
not that much, I don't think, but it doesn't matter. I mean, somehow girls still end up getting stuff done.
Yeah.
You know, we just do we just have to work kind of harder, the same way that black folks kind of work harder. Have to work harder. Like women just have to, you know. There are, and it's unfortunate because it ends up wasting a lot of time and a lot of, we end up having to putting out work that we don't need to do. Like there's diplomacy that women just learn how to do early on in life that that helps us get to where we need to go.
Yeah.
It's just that extra effort would be so much better used in other places.
I would
But
agree with you.
but what I try to do is pull others up, and help other women, um, get to the places they need to go without having to go those routes.
So if a woman is watching this conversation, which there are plenty,
Yeah.
and they are thinking about whatever it is, whatever their baby is, be it an album, be it
Right.
a mural, be it a play, whatever. What's some advice that you can give on that beginning when you're first trying to start and see some type of movement to know you're headed in the right direction?
Some advice. Well, never lose sight of what your end goal is. Never lose sight of that. That doesn't mean that sometimes you might have to chart your course a little differently, but as long as you're focused on the end goal, you'll get there. You know,
Yeah.
just don't be too rigid about your course to get there. You know, there's a lot of different ways to get to the Hollywood sign. You know,
Hmm.
you know
Yeah.
what there's a lot of different streets you could take. So just stay the course, and or just keep your eye on the goal. You
Yeah.
know, keep your head in the game, keep your eye on the goal.
So I was listening to Perspective. Okay.
Ah,
Shout out to Perspective. I love that song.
thank you.
Um, how do you keep it in perspective as it relates to love?
Come
Because
on,
so
segue.
many, so many times, so many, so many times I'm interviewing male artists or male creatives, and there's this thing like, hey baby, I just don't have enough time. I gotta work on my stuff. It's that Bleak Gilliam Mo Better Blues, mentality. But there's another side of that too, which is, I would say, arguably harder, in terms of being a woman, knowing what you want, finding that, and still being able to be an artist at the same time. And that has to do a lot with perspective, because I feel like, as a woman entrepreneur, you kind of have to be, there are moments where you have to be ready to go upside somebody's, temple, or chop the Adam's apple or something like that. So how do you, in the midst of all that chaos, find love?
I think I think that love finds you. You know, I think that for me, you know, mine came around at the right time, and he was the right one. You know, and he knew what he was getting into. you know, but and we were together. For instance, I've been married now for almost, it'll be 10 years next month. So, um, but we've been together for like 17 years.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, and let me see. He knew what he was getting into, but I think also I learned a lot. And I'm still learning a lot about being present, you know, um, and balance, and taking care of someone else's needs, learning how to take care of someone else's needs, and really finding joy in that, you know.
Yeah.
Um, this COVID this COVID crisis has made it so that I'm home. This is the most consecutive days that I've been home since 2012.
Wow.
Right. I've never been home this much. So I'm learning a lot right now about like being married. Like, oh, snap. You live here? Oh, my husband is also an artist. He's an actor and a filmmaker. And we've done a lot of work together. Like he's directed a bunch of my videos, but we've been able to collaborate in this time of pandemic, you know, and it's because we're home together, and we're like, he's like, hey, I want to do a variety show, and I'm like, a variety show like Sonny and Cher? And he's like, yeah, and we did it, you know, and we've done it twice actually.
Wow.
But you know, finding love in this kind of chaos really requires that you are open to receiving the right answers, even when you're asking the wrong questions. You know, that's kind of what perspective is, you know, and being able to switch your perspective on a dime, you know, because sometimes it's right in front of you and you can't see it because you're doing this, you know. So that perspective, that being able to sort of, that being malleable with your perspective is what allows us to function in this world and to be successful, you know. You can't really be successful, and you can't really be satisfied with anything in life if you're not able to bend a little, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, you know, and find your space, you know. Yeah.
Did you? I find it cool that it's the convergence of two elements of the arts together that feed off of each other quite frequently.
Yeah.
Um, have you? Is it like, you know, when your husband's doing his thing, he's like, hey, is he like schooling you like, hey, wait, hold up, you know, this is the movie stuff, this is me, all right, and then you were doing the music stuff, like, hey, this is the music stuff, this is me, or is it an even exchange? How does it
it's
work in the?
it's very much an even exchange, and he's actually a really good classical pianist, like really good. So he can speak my language, you know, and I'm actually a pretty good actor, so I can speak his language, you know.
Makes
So
sense, yeah.
it actually works out, and we're able to bounce ideas off of each other, and we're able to help each other out with projects that separate projects, you know, like if he's putting an audition on tape, I'm usually the one running the camera and saying the other lines, you know. And if I'm
Nice.
practicing a song that I want to do for an online show, he'll be my audience before I present it, you know. Yeah, yeah. So it's really good.
Okay, so I have to ask you about being Emmy nominated.
Ah,
Yeah,
yeah,
that I think that's, you know, obviously musicians and artists, sometimes they can be one track minded when it comes to where their place can be. And you mentioned this earlier about your course and being open to, you know, going in whatever direction you need to go into in order to further or to get further along in the overall pathway. And I just find it very interesting that you've been able to occupy space and meaningful space in different arenas. You know, so I was curious about how everything came about for that Emmy nomination.
so this was probably, oh gosh, I don't know, 2000, 2001, 2000. And I got a call. I think at the time, you know, like Sunshine Anderson was hot, and and her management. I think they had called her management to do this song for a movie called Dancing in September. But I think she was busy. I think she was like on tour, you know, like she physically couldn't be there to do what they wanted her to do. And they needed a song for the beginning of this movie. And they had a song there, but that artist was charging a whole lot of money, right?
Okay.
So they just needed somebody who could write something that would make them just as excited about this opening montage as that song that they had as the placeholder for the, you know, directors will put a song in there and it, you know, and they'll be watching their rough cuts and, you know, and they get married to those songs, you know.
Yeah, they do.
And when they find out they can't use it, they're like, you know, the whole world is ruined for them, you know. So here I come, you know, and they don't know me, you know. But I got to the studio and I saw the montage, and the movie was about, you know, it was about a screenwriter and a show. And, you know, so the opening montage was all these like shows from the 70s and 80s and, you know, all that kind of stuff we grew up on. So I knew, and they had all these parameters, Kameron, like it had to be such and such beats per minute, and it had to be a minute and 45 seconds long, and you know, and I was like, all right, you know, I can work with that, you know, like I'm not scared of no rules, you know.
Yeah.
And so Mark Sparks was in there, the producer Mark Sparks, and he was kind of playing around with a drum pattern. And I think my man Eric Coombs was playing bass, and you know, he was just playing this lick, boom, 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 boom. And I was like, I got this. I'm gonna write this right now. And I wrote the song kind of going along with the montage, right? Not every single line, because I didn't want it to get corny.
Yeah.
But it kind of went with what you saw.
Nice.
And it was like, you know, and I kind of wrote it so that it felt like, I wanted it to feel like, you know, somebody's grandpa sitting on the porch singing, you know, somebody just, you know. And so that's how I wrote it. And it was called Welcome Back on My Soulmates. And it went, I'm taking you back to the days that we all remember. About the same time we was dancing in September. When we were so black and so proud. Nobody said it to say it loud. Before we got caught up in the self-hate. Welcome back all my soulmates. Hey. Welcome back all my soulmates. Hey. Welcome back all my soulmates. I'm taking you back, baby, so press rewind. On that little time machine in your mind. Back when all the Jacksons were so fine, and you and your girl be like, Michael is mine, you know. And I wanted to feel like, you know, and so that's how we did it. And you know, the movie came out on HBO, and it was great, and I had fun watching the movie. And then I got a call like, hey, we think you might be up for an Emmy. And I'm like, what? I didn't even know that was possible, you know. That wasn't my world, you know. And yeah. I got nominated for an Emmy for that, up against, you know, John Williams and, you know, like, you know, those kind of names. And I couldn't even believe it. And I didn't win it, but just being there was it was just an amazing seat to fill, you know, to be in, you know. And I wish I would get more opportunities to write for those types of movies and productions. Because I'm like, come on, if I can get an Emmy nod out the gate,
yeah,
imagine what I could get if, you know, if you guys, you know, hired me to do more of this. So
wow.
So hey, Ava.
Right. Wow. I got a ton of questions, so I'm trying to like make sure I'm like checking to make sure I get through all of them. But Good and Strong.
Yeah. Yo.
Felt like it's very relevant.
Very relevant.
And you know, I was working out, and so imagine me working out, and I'm like, yeah, and I'm like listening to Perspective, and I'm hearing the upright bass, and like, yeah, and I'm like, wow, this is making me very introspective, you know.
Yeah.
Good and Strong really stuck out to me. There are a couple of different things I want to ask you about songs in particular, but for Good and Strong, like the storytelling element of it, I thought is very, very poignant.
Thank you.
The chorus, and especially the first verse going into the chorus.
Thank you.
I was like, it's so appropriate.
Right.
You know.
So for the people watching who don't know, Good and Strong is from the Psycho Soul album. And I wrote that song with Gypsy Stokes. Okay. And I think I wrote this when me and Gypsy were over at Dr. Dre's studio at Record One, like all the time. I feel like that's when I wrote it. But it's a song about an uprising that happens. The first verse is about an uprising that happens as a result of racial profiling in a store and someone getting arrested who shouldn't have been arrested. And the second verse is just about sort of income inequality and you know, financial inequities that happen in our community. And I'm saying all these big words, but but the hook is like, I sure could use a good strong man, a good strong drink, a good strong slap across the face to make me think, a good strong prayer for peace in my mind, because the war just keeps on, it just keeps on going all the time. And it's so relevant right now, and you're not the first person to bring it up. It's a trip, you know. And the first verse is, so I went to the store, I was looking for a solution. I think I damn near caused some kind of revolution. See, Mr. Chang seemed to think I was some kind of thief undercover. His daddy told him to watch out for the sisters and the brothers, sisters and the brothers, sisters and the brothers. So he followed me around. Next thing I know, the cops are throwing me the book. Nobody even bothered to ask me what I took. And my peeps got mad at how that shit went down. So everybody lit a match and burned that mother sucker to the ground. I sure could use her. And that's how things happen. that's how things happen for us, you know, and have been happening for us.
Yeah.
And I think I wrote that song probably in 98, 99. So this is not too long after Latasha Harlins was killed in LA by the shop owner for stealing, even though she had put her money on the counter. You know, the lady still shot her and killed her, and the judge gave her probation. You know, so these kinds of things have been happening to us, and we've been hollering about them for a long time. You know, I think it hurts me that George Floyd had to die and it be caught on video for, you know, for people to really start paying attention here. It hurts me that the entire world had to protest and take to the streets for those officers to be arrested. But my God, if we don't have everybody's attention now, you know, and that's a good thing, because now, you know, all eyes on us. What you know, all eyes are on the system. What is the system gonna do? Yeah. You know,
what is the system gonna do?
What is the system gonna do?
It's crazy because I was watching a stand-up by Dave Chappelle, who DC, you know, shout out to DC. And he was talking about apartheid in South Africa, and he's like, you know, by all accounts, when apartheid ended, it should have been, you know, way more than of a bloodbath than what it was.
Right.
You know, and he said somewhere along the way, Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela and everyone figured out that if a system is corrupt, everyone in the system has got to be able to admit the role they played in the system.
Yeah.
And reconciliation doesn't come unless everybody is willing to be transparent about their side, you know what I mean?
Right.
There are just as many people who may not overtly do anything, but it's just maybe the thought that's in their mind. Like if I know, and I was raised that, you know, put it like this, I wear my baseball hat forward in certain situations, and in other situations I feel comfortable wearing it backwards. I know that if I'm walking into a situation especially during COVID, right? I've got my mask on.
Uh-huh.
If I'm walking
Right.
into a situation and I look a certain way,
Right.
automatically, but add a mask to that. I remember going into GNC. I went into GNC during the early part of COVID.
Come
And
on and get your vitamins. Come on now.
I was walking in there. I was like, yo, it's 10 in the morning. I'm about to get my stuff and get up out of there.
Mm-hmm.
I had like a hospital grade mask on. I walked in, nobody in there. Well, there's two guys in there. Two guys in there. They were talking amongst themselves. And then when I walked in there, they stopped talking. And the guy jokingly said, oh, man, I thought you were here to rob the place. Now, it's 10 a.m. It's in a wealthy neighborhood in Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going into GNC, right? And this is not like a GNC that you could easily access. So, you had to have knowledge about the fact that it was even there in the first place.
Right.
And my response to them was like, yeah, I'm here to rob you at 10 a.m. in Buckhead, but it was just like, it's just like the cynicism related to the real overt racism is just as bad, because it plants the seed for racism, for a more racist situation to sprout and occur later.
Right.
Right.
And you saying that, you telling him that, like, yeah, I'm here at 10 a.m. to rob you in Bucket. Like, listen to how ridiculous you sound. Listen to how silly that sounds. Don't you feel silly now? Don't you feel like an idiot? Because that's what, that's what this is. That's what racism is. It's idiocy, completely. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. I wanted to ask you, though, inside of Good and Strong, the first line of the chorus, which you eloquently delivered, had to do with a man, right? And I want to ask you, within our community, there is a discussion that needs to be had amongst cool heads.
Yes,
I think, because we have the discussion informally, and it takes place in the midst of just shade and comments slung around.
Right.
But there's truth to the fact that there's a divide a little bit.
Yeah.
But between Black men and Black women. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah.
That's a tactic. In South Africa, they used to come through at night and take all the men away from the family. Sometimes take both parents away and leave the kids in the house by themselves at night. So it's a tactic of dividing and conquering on a systematic level. But, sometimes we don't really realize that, you got to go against the grain in order to change some things. Yeah. And I felt like in the midst of everything we're going through, it felt good to hear you say that. It didn't take away from your power at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I want to know from your perspective, what does it take for us to have that open dialogue in order to try to repair some of that disconnect that we have?
I think it takes us creating our own safe spaces where we can have those discussions, and whatever safe space means to whoever's putting it together and whoever's going to be involved. Maybe safe space means no phones. Maybe safe space means, no cameras. Maybe safe space means a specific age group. Maybe we just want to have 35 and under talking about this. So maybe, whatever that means. But I think that's what it's going to take, is people creating safe spaces, us creating safe spaces to have those conversations. Places where we can talk and know that it's going to stay right there. That nothing is going to leave that space except for the purpose of mending and healing, the community. But nothing is going to leave that space, for any other purpose, But that's what we have to do, That's really what it's going to come down to. Because I've been having these conversations with some of my friends, and talking about the psyche of Black men and Black women right now. you know, and how, you know, for instance, you know, like we are hearing so much about George Floyd and not hearing as much about Breonna Taylor. And a friend of mine said to me, you know, uh, when black men are killed by the police, you know, other black men just, you know, they feel angry. But when black women are killed, black men feel shame. And, you know, that feeling of shame and just all of the you know, all of the things that come with that, you know, are part of the reason there might be contempt between us, you know, and we don't even know why, you know.
Yeah.
But yes, the dialogue is needed and the space is needed, but we got to make sure that it's safe, you know, and that we feel secure in it to have those conversations, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know who should start them, but you know, I don't know if it should be me and you or you know, but you know, but yeah, we definitely need it, you know.
So let's talk about We Were Never Free.
Well,
And you can answer it in any way you want, but I want to know, what does freedom look like in 2020? Because I felt like when I was a kid, I used to be like, oh man, I'm so glad that I don't have to deal with what my grandparents and my parents had to deal with, and that everybody is you know, has been changed for the better. And
right.
and I realized my parents were trying to shelter me as long as they could
Yeah.
from those experiences.
Yeah.
And the concept of freedom is just, I don't know, you know, it still seems like that finish line that keeps
Yeah.
moving back. So what does freedom mean 2020, and talk about it in connection with the song?
I think there's a clip of Nina Simone, and she says, "Do you know what freedom is? No fear. You know, just being able to." She didn't say this next part, but I'm expounding upon it. Just being able to live in the world freely with no fear. You know, now that doesn't mean, you know, walk into a crazy neighborhood at a crazy time of night and, you know, opening your purse up. Like that's no sense. That's no common sense. You know, no fear means, you know, just being able to go to the park and watch birds without someone calling the cops on you. You know, um, no fear means, you know, being able to put on rollerblades and ride through the neighborhood without somebody on nextdoor.com saying there's a suspicious looking lady while going through my neighborhood. She happens to be African American with an afro, but she looks suspicious. You know, that's what no fear means. And I think that's what freedom, that's part of what freedom is, you know, just being able to live your life, you know. Um, we Were Never Free, the song, I have this thing for flowers. You see my
I
rose?
do.
Right. I
So
have
dope.
this thing for flowers, and I remember listening to I think it was probably some scientific podcast or something, and they were talking about how trees have networks, you know, and flowers have networks underground, you know, and they communicate with each other. Trees communicate with each other, you know, and if water is only coming to one part of a forest, somehow they will redistribute it so that kind of all the trees kind of get what they need to get, you know. And it was fascinating. And they were talking about, you know, how plucking a flower or a tree from that network kind of disrupts the entire network. And it made me think of how we were plucked up from the land we came from and then brought somewhere else to just make everything work, make everything right, make things grow, provide for us. And I was like, wow, it's just the same thing we do to flowers, kind of. We pluck them out of the ground and put them in a vase and go, be pretty for me, you know?
Mm.
And so that verse in We Were Never Free goes, pretty little flowers brighten up my space. No one knows the horrors that brought them to this place. And I thought it would be interesting to sing a really pretty melody about something kind of ugly, you know, um, because that just juxtaposition to me is interesting, you know. And I think when people hear the song, at first they're like, ooh, la 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 la. What?
Yeah.
Did she say no one knows the horrors? You know, yeah, I did. Keep singing.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's what we're expected to do. We're expected to just keep singing along like nothing is happening to us, you know? And that's that negative piece that everybody thought we had for the last couple of years. Whenever there are no riots, people just, you know, people who aren't us assume that everything is all right, you know.
Right.
But everything's not all right, and we're not all right, you know. And yeah, we're out in the streets now because you weren't listening when we tried to tell you, you know, peacefully, you know. And
Yeah.
I'm not condoning riots or anything like that, but I'm just saying the peace that you thought we had wasn't real, you know. It was just, you know, you not listening.
Yeah.
You know.
When people feel like they can turn away, or
Right.
that they can live their daily life and it not come into their peripheral,
Right.
then, you know, it's almost like out of sight, out of mind. It's almost like when I was taking some education classes and I had to learn about early childhood development.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like when a kid is really young, when a kid is a baby, you know, you can play peekaboo.
Right.
Because to them, their viewpoint and what they see is all that's what exists and
What
doesn't
exists.
exist.
Right.
So it's like once you can't ignore it, you have to face it.
Right.
And we have to face certain things as a group of collective humans.
Right.
It's not just, oh, it's their they're having a
Right.
they're having an
Exactly.
issue with this, you know. So I really loved that song.
Thank you.
And I love your shirt.
Thank
And
you.
I wanted to ask you about I felt like the title of Sometimes a Rose Will Grow
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in Concrete is very, there's so many things to explore inside of that, you
I
know?
love how you're so into the specific words.
Yeah.
You pick up on the minutia that in a way that a lot of people don't. I really appreciate that.
No problem. No problem. I like to, I consider myself a wordsmith, so I appreciate it when
Yeah.
I can find, it's like finding a treasure, you know?
Right. Right. Or
Um,
the Easter egg. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, I started thinking about different things like, oh, wow, does that mean planting a rose in concrete and it growing?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Does it mean a rose was already there growing and then concrete becomes all around it and it
Uh-huh.
still grows?
Uh-huh.
I want to get, you know, your perspective behind
Yeah.
that title.
The it's one of those things. The song came to me kind of in one fell swoop, in that sort of piano lick, you know, happened, and not too long after that came to my fingers the and then I think, you know, it was like a couple of minutes before I said, sometimes a rose will grow in concrete. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, you know. And I just allowed myself to sort of be a vessel for whatever that idea was and wherever it was coming from, and did very little editing of the idea. And so the concept, as you were asking, the song sort of deals with sort of oppositional concepts happening at the same time. Sometimes a rose will grow on concrete, sometimes a caged bird will sing. Sometimes the whole will be incomplete. Sometimes the captives don't complain. You know, these things that seem like they shouldn't be, you know, they shouldn't happen, but sometimes they do. Or do they? Or is that just the way you see them? Are the captives not complaining, or are you just not hearing them? You know, is the whole incomplete, or, you know, was it ever whole to begin with? You know, um, And so it's sort of about reframing the way we think we know things, you know, because that's what it is. And a lot of times we think we know something, and it turns out that that's not really what it is at all, you know. Is the rose growing through concrete, or did someone come along and dump concrete on a rose field? You know, what, you know, how did it happen? Should we question any of this, or should we just celebrate the fact that the rose is here? That part I kind of leave open, because the resolution is not for me to give. You know, it's kind of for us to figure out, or the listener to figure out, you know. The only thing that I know is that we are that rose. We are the roses. We came through a very impossible circumstance, and we still bloom and produce beautiful things, you know. Black people produce such beautiful shit. Like, I'm always like, wow, you know,
Yeah.
we are a beautiful thing. And that, to me, should be celebrated. And a lot of times, you know, I hear people say things like, so and so, you know, if they're telling a success story of someone, you know, despite coming from blah, 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 he was able to go to college and get a PhD and fly rockets, you know. And it's like, we aren't beautiful despite
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. We are beautiful because of the things that we have come from. You know, we're not, you know, beautiful despite coming from, you know, maybe poverty, or a somewhat broken home, or what, you know. We are beautiful because the things that surrounded us made us beautiful. You know, they polished us. You know what I mean? And so I think it's also a sort of a celebration of, you know, a celebration of the concrete in a way, you know, a celebration of the thing, because a lot of times I think we are taught to view our communities as from a pathological standpoint. And I think it's important to not apply pathology to places that are healthy. We just got to see where our health is, you know?
Mm,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
wow.
yeah.
I feel like, you know, that's part of building a community, you know.
Yeah.
You see, you I I like to go back to teaching, because one of the reasons why I left teaching is because I didn't believe in the bureaucracy of teaching any longer. It became corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I escaped corporate America to become a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there were a couple ideas that we always were taught. Praise and ignore, which
Mm-hmm.
is praise the ones that are doing what you want them to do,
Mm-hmm.
and ignore the ones that are not, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to focus on the positive behavior, you know. Um, at the same time, though, I found myself like, man, in our community, there's there's a lot of focus from the outside, which it only lingers. It just causes things to linger on the inside, but we focus on the negative so much.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I would take my attention to the kid who was causing all the trouble,
Mm-hmm.
it would make some of the kids who were doing what they were supposed to start causing trouble, because they
Right.
wanted the result, the end game, like you
Right.
talked about before, was I want attention from Mr. K. You know
Right.
what I mean? Um, and I always used to be like, man, you know, we're always giving the ones that are, you know, we focus so much of our attention, and rightly so, you know, on things that are going wrong, but there are things that we should be very proud of too, and it's okay to
Yeah.
celebrate each other. And it doesn't mean you're arrogant. It doesn't mean you're
Yeah.
cocky. You
Yeah.
know, it's something to feel good about. You know what I mean? So that other people can glean from it, like you know, we glean from our experiences as well. I thought it was very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I still do. Um, I wanted to ask you though about your voice work,
Okay. Okay. Okay.
because I keep saying, like, Sai has done it all and been successful at it. Like, the people out here who are watching do not know, I'm sure, that about your voice work. Like, can you? I'm not going to give anything away because I think it's such an interesting element to your career. But
sure, someone in the comments was like, "Talk about Saints Row. Talk about Saints Row." Yeah, so I've done a little bit of voice work because I am a believer that I want to because I want to do anything I can with my voice. Like I want to do anything I can with all of the parts of me that are able to do them. You know what I mean? So to me, being a vocalist is not just about singing. It's about being a vocalist, being able to use your voice to vocalize things however you can. So I was lucky enough to get a call, this is some years ago, from my agent. And she was like, "Hey, there's an audition for a video game. Do you want to go in for it?" And I was like, "Sure." So I came in, I went in and read, and I got the part. And it was Aisha for a game called Saints Row. And so I went and did this, and I think this was one of my early voiceover gigs. And it was cool. It was like, Saints Row was kind of like a Death Row Records kind of thing situation.
Okay.
And Aisha was a recording artist on the label, and there was like fighting and, like saying stuff, Johnny, wait, oh, ooh, lots of, that kind of thing. Right? And I was leaving the session. I was like, hey, to the creator of the game, I think, who was there. I was like, hey, I'm a recording artist in real life. Do you need any music for this game? And he was like, yeah, and he was like, what are you doing? I was like, I write songs and sing and produce, whatever, And he was like, I'll call your agent. So I get a call from my agent, and she was like, Sai, did you tell them that you could blah, blah, blah? And I was like, yeah. What you got? And she was like, okay, well, he's interested in you, making some music for the game. And I was like, yes. She said, he wants to know if he can give you the song titles. If he gives you the song title, can you write a song for that title? And I was like, yeah, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what was coming. And she was like, okay, great. I'll call you back. And she calls me back. It's like, Sai, I have the song titles. I was like, cool. What are they? And she's like, are you sitting down? And I'm like, oh, snap. What's about to happen here? And she gave me the song titles. Kameron, let's just say these aren't anything I could sing at First Baptist Church, right?
Okay.
But it's a character, so I'm with it. The first song title is "Bounce Like My Checks." All right, bounce like my checks. Boom, I'm writing it down. Okay, what's the next song title? Leave the hoe. Okay. Leave the hoe? Okay. Leave the hoe. All right. What's next? She's like, Sai, I'm not going to curse. Don't F me like I'm your wife. I was like, come again? Sai, don't F me like I'm your wife. Okay, don't F me like I'm your wife. Okay, bounce like my checks, leave the hoe, and don't F me like I'm your wife. Okay, I got it. I'll write these songs. I'll get back to you.
Wow.
And I wrote the songs, and I came up with the concept for each kind of song. Like I was like bounce like my checks. I'll kind of make that like some Atlanta kind of bounce. Boom, 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 boom. Just like some bounce shit. And leave the hoe. I kind of approached like I created my own sample and then sped it up, and did that kind of thing. And it was very R&B, Don't you know that it's you gotta leave the hoe to be with me, live in luxury. Look at your situation, you will surely see. You need it, it was that kind of thing.
Nice. Yes.
And don't F me like I'm your wife. I did 2 versions of this song. The first version that I did kind of ended up sounding like some, like Prince protege. and I really liked it, so I kept it. And then I did another one that was more like organ based, like the evil version of Alicia Keys, you know, like.
Gotcha.
And I did that one. That's the one that they got. But I have a different version of that song that I really like, and I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day, but it just gives me satisfaction because I like the way it came out.
Wow, that's awesome. That's just, I mean, it inspired me because I know I've been thinking about like, hey, you know, I wonder, you know, and then boom, I'm like, okay, it can happen, you know. So for me, like a lot of these conversations, I end up walking away more inspired to try to open my, you know, lexicon of skills even more.
That's
I
so
wanted to
funny. Dwayne Powell just chimed in like, your first version of DFM, like I'm your wife, was the shit. He remembers it. That is so funny. Okay, I'm sorry, Karen.
Wow, no, it's all good. It's all good. I wanted to wrap up and just tell you I appreciate you for coming on. I know we spoke in you know, briefly before, and we were both excited, and it has not been a disappointment at all. It's
Thank
been
you.
really good. I'm so glad that you accepted immediately, and I can't thank you enough. I wanted to give these last few minutes to you to tell everybody who's watching or who will watch this
Oh,
subsequently after we've ended, what to expect, what to look out for, and you know, anything you love.
okay. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for, reaching out to me and inviting me on your show. I really appreciate being here, and I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing, for music and for the community of artists, So thank you for that. Let's see. We've talked about me. Everybody knows my name, Cy Smith. I hope you know my name. You can, if you're interested in getting my music, I'm on all the platforms. But if you like hard copies, I sell them like my album. Woo-hoo! You can get vinyl from me at cysmith.com. Just click cysmith.com and then click store, to get vinyl. I have CDs. I have my old albums at Cyberspace Social. And I have the remix albums. Sometimes a rose will get a remix. And Fast and Curious. I forgot about Fast and Curious. I have that
Yeah,
upstairs too. And I have T-shirts and all kinds of
that
things.
t-shirt's so dope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just go to my store or go to cyberspace.bigcartel.com. And don't forget to follow me here on Facebook. I'm at facebook.com/CySmithMusic. And
Nice.
yeah, it's everybody knows how to find me. I'm right here. Much love from
Yeah.
the DMV. Hey, DMV. Shout out to Howard University. Shout out to Eleanor Roosevelt High School. And shout out to my community where I am right now, West Adams, Los Angeles.
Nice. Thank you so much again. And you know, I'll be communicating with you offline. I usually grab some special moments that I love
Okay.
and post those in addition to these being available. So be looking for that later on
Thank you.
this evening. And thanks once again. You know, I look
Thank you. I
forward
had
to
a good
talking to you.
time. I had a
No
really good
problem.
time.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye.